talking about your question?
Sure.
Okay, so as it's on the board, our question was how are Pallas, Enkidu, and Patroclus similar? And the main similarity, or it's also how are they different, but we're going to talk about the similarities first. In all three cases, the main character immediately tried to avenge their death in every case. So in the case of Pallas, it was Aeneas. In the case of Enkidu, it was Gilgamesh, and in the case of Patroclus, it was Achilles.
We talked a little bit about like the different nature of the relationships in the different books. So with Achilles and Patroclus, they were like really close, and you don't really see that with Aeneas and Pallas. They're kind of do you want to talk about like their
Yeah, so instead of it being like, we talked about how like the friendship, if you can say so, was like newly formed, that Pallas was just like put into war by his father. And we talked about how Aeneas like relationship to him is more to his father and the responsibility to keep him alive and to honor his father.
Right, so the relationship is kind of different like between both of them, but after the one dies, the two heroes like both have kind of a similar reaction, like go on a killing spree to avenge the death of their friend / partner.
And another difference between Pallas and the other two was that Gilgamesh and Enkidu, although like they're basically on the same footing, they're equal experiences. They're both good fighters. Patroclus and Achilles, even though Achilles was obviously the better fighter, Patroclus could hold his own. And in the case of Aeneas and Pallas, Pallas had never experienced anything before. He was supposed to be a mentee, not like a comrade necessarily.
Do you have any specific examples from the text?
Probably.
While I guess you're doing that, I think something interesting too to think about is even though they didn't have really a relationship before, like we saw with Enkidu and Patroclus, at the end, actually, like the last passage, Aeneas, what he does is all because of he sees the belt that Turnus took from Pallas. He says, this is the final book, page 386, lines like 1100. He says, young Pallas, whom Turnus had overpowered, taken down with a wound, and now his shoulder flaunted his enemy's battle emblem like a trophy. Aeneas, soon as his eyes drink in that plunder, keepsake of his own savage grief, flaring up in fury, terrible in his rage, he cries, decked in the spoils of you, stripped from one I love, escape my clutches, never. Pallas strikes this blow. Pallas sacrifices you now. Makes you pay the price with your own guilty blood. So that's just an example of, like, we actually do get to see Aeneas' like sensitivity, and finally this like really brutal action is all in the name of Pallas, even though they weren't as close as Enkidu.
Where'd you say that was again? I'm sorry.
3-6 line.
It's like the last lines of the whole book.
But,
Yeah.
12. Okay, got it.
Yeah, like 1100.
And to go off that, I mean, we know that Virgil fabricated this story to some degree, but I mean, I don't personally know how much Virgil made this up and compared to like what's actually true. So I'm saying that, do we know exactly how Pallas' role in the story serves for Aeneas' killing in the end? Like, do you think Virgil just kind of put Pallas in that position of just being put in there as a role to play as like a Patroclus kind of figure? Since he was well read in the Iliad and knew that Achilles was driven by his rage and love for Patroclus and also his hate for Hector as a result. So do you think that really echoes that more so, or do you think it's actually just true and just goes on with these events?
And yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that's an example of the like representative of the alliances, and maybe Pallas is like a symbol for all of Aeneas's like reach and power in alliances.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Does anybody else have any more comments about the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus and how they relate to Aeneas and Pallas? If not, we can move to Group Grape.
Okay, so basically, it's a large question, but the actual question is, in your mind, what do you think about the fact that Aeneas does not kill Camilla? Book 11, page 344, lines 699. Diana states, whoever defiles Camilla's sacred body with the word Trojan time, they contain me with Christ and blood. And then on page 352, 199, she states, whoever defiled yours and Camilla's body with that wound will pay the death that he deserves. So basically, with that implication, if Aeneas were to have killed Camilla, then he would have died, and that would have gone against the fates, which would kind of screw the entire thing up. So I think that would be my answer.
Also, our question asked to relate the daughter of Ares coming to aid the Trojans after showing great prowess and her being killed by Achilles to Aeneas not killing Camilla. And in book 11, page 325, line about 25, it says that no taking us off guard, no hanging back, no dread, must cripple our steps with anxious second thoughts when the gods allow us to pull our standards up. And that was Aeneas speaking. And I feel like in the Aeneid, Aeneas is more driven by when the gods allow him to like beat the other side, and I feel like in the Iliad, Achilles is more driven by like this blind rage and blind fury, and he like goes off that in order to like kind of like kill everyone in like a rage-driven manner, whereas Aeneas is more driven by like what the gods decree him to do and how they empower him.
I think part of it also is Aeneas, how do you pronounce his name? No, A-U-N-U-S. Honest, I don't know.
Okay.
He's just what?
What page are you on?
248. Honest. Like around line 830. He seems like, or around line 840. He seems to kind of be portrayed as kind of like devious. He's not portrayed well per se for killing Camilla. And I think part of it is Achilles wasn't always given like the most honorable traits. Like when he dragged Hector around, that was more like blind fury and rage and just like battle spirit as opposed to like the honorable like thing to do in war. And part of it is Aeneas is more like honor bound.
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, if you just look at the roles that they play, I think Aeneas has a fundamentally different type of protagonist. You know, I mean, he's very pious, he's morally upright and everything else, whereas, like you said, in the Iliad, you see Achilles, he's kind of this tragic hero who's driven by his anger. You know, he doesn't have a lot of remorse for his actions and everything else, he just kind of does.
Yeah.
Whereas Aeneas is driven along on this kind of journey towards founding Rome. He's just pushed onward by the gods and his own kind of inner strength. It really shows.
Sorry, I don't know.
He's done.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
I was thinking all of that. Yeah, I mean, it goes the fact that it opens up. Like one of the first lines is talking about this is the story of Achilles' rage. And the only thing that we know he has is that he's going to die gloriously on the battlefield somehow, or he just goes back home and lives a very long and peaceful life. And saying that that's only kind of notion of fate that Achilles seems to have in the Iliad, from what I gathered. And in this one, it's extremely contrast, like you said, with how Aeneas is really devout. He's completely guided by the fate of the gods, as far as we can see. That's like the Virgil's trying to set it up. And so that's a very big difference between like Camilla's death and then this other Amazon's death.
Jumping back to what Will was saying when his group first started talking about why Aeneas didn't kill Camilla because it would go against his fate, it reminded me a lot of our discussion about free will a couple days ago, and so what I was asking when I read that is, did he not kill her because it wasn't fated, or did he make that conscious decision not to? So was it free will or was it fate?
I would say fate. Because was there, can you tell me, was there a time when Aeneas was presented with the opportunity?
Right, but with someone so skilled at war, I feel like he could have found one if he had wanted to.
But was there? But the text doesn't give us like a direct reason to like suppose that like Aeneas is like wanting to go hunting.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, it can't be like there's no right or wrong answer to that line.
I think we could tack on to that. Like Aeneas, even though Camilla was this great warrior, she was still a woman, and so from that perspective, you could say that she was still lesser in some way as a warrior. So it's not like Aeneas had some, like, oh no, I've got to stop Camilla before she runs down all my troops. And I don't know if that's how it's intended to be, but I think you could make that jump possibly that Aeneas like felt no great need to come and like stop Camilla in her tracks because he thought that she would be stopped.
I didn't get that. I thought that she was a pretty big threat. I mean, outside of Turnus and I forget his like second in command, Metichus.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that she was probably top 3 on that side. So I think that
I felt like reading this that she was a big threat, but I don't know if like that's like an underlying thing at all from like a historical perspective. Like back when this story was written, if that's like anything that Virgil had.
Isabel?
Although like it often describes her as being like really powerful and scary, you can tell that the other team is like they still are like, she's just a woman, like we should be able to defeat her. In book 11, page 348, line 860, like 5-ish, they say, what is a woman routing squadrons strong as ours? So they like know like it's not just like, oh, she's another soldier, like she's a woman and will be continued to be defined that way. And even though she's strong, they're like, she's just a woman, like we should be able to be better than her.
Yeah, it's not a matter of like how strong is she, but how do they perceive her.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I think she's very capable and very strong, but that doesn't really matter because they still just see her as a woman.
Yeah.
I mean, book 11 is also called like Camilla's finest hour, and so one thing that we see is doing Virgil seems to do is like draw out Turnus and Aeneas' confrontation, and I'll split up this is a summary analysis bit. It mentions how Camilla sets up the fated showdown between Turnus and Aeneas, and so maybe her main role as this virgin like Amazonian warrior who does really well in battle is, with her obsession, it says, in this analysis at least, it says her obsession with battle is like her singular flaw, like Dido's kind of was, like this sort of singular passion, and she dies, and that's what brings back Turnus to his town to confront Aeneas in front of like both armies and have this like grand final showdown. So maybe it's just like another step in setting up this final duel between Turnus and Aeneas. So maybe that's like the main emphasis of her role rather than like her being a woman and stuff, which is also something that Tolkien focuses on, but it may be shadowed about the overall purpose of her existence.
And the connotation that's used to describe her is like almost more vivid and more positive than anyone else, like tireless grasp, lightning fast on her feet. I don't know. I think that obviously we don't see what you were saying. We don't see them coming face to face. If I remember correctly, I couldn't find it. I was looking. She's struck by a stray arrow, right? Like the person who shot her wasn't aiming at her.
Yeah.
No, that was one.
Aeolus is orange.
Is that someone else?
Yeah, it's like-
Okay, never
yeah,
mind.
Trickster.
Okay, so,
I think that happened to Aeneas too, though.
oh, right,
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
way. Right, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Not thinking of a little hollow, like, made it so that way she can sound like it was fun.
Yeah, backing up what Zach said, I found the passage you're referring to. It's on page 350, book 11, line 315. It says, 317. It says, 917, sorry.
Oh, okay.
It says she stalks him wildly, reckless through the ranks, afire with a woman's lust for loot and plunder. And just like, diction like that is just kind of like, it's showing that the amount of like respect and how much regard they actually have for a woman at the time, regardless of whether she's this badass warrior, which she clearly is. It's there like describes her a woman's lust for loot and plunder, which is kind of like,
I think the next page is for death.
I feel like she's always like she's like held in very high regard, but like always in the context of the fact that she's
Yeah.
So when they said it, they didn't say with a warrior's lust for the
I mean, yeah, but you have to look at that just in the context of the authorship again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just Virgil writing as a Roman. You know, the Romans say the same things about women that they do about nationalities that they disapprove of. Oh, he's a Gaul. He's a really great Gaul, but he's
Right.
still a Gaul.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So there's a like a qualifier.
And I think that we talked, I don't know if it was last time or the time before that, about how the Roman society kind of improved upon Greek society, but like still isn't all the way like modern. It's still obviously a long time ago. So like in Greek times, like I'm pretty sure like women were not allowed to be warriors, period. So now like this is a female warrior, and though she's still regarded as a woman, it's still a step forward because she's a general, she's a big deal, even though they still describe her in kind of demeaning terms. Like she's still allowed to be there, which is cool.
Okay, so do we want to move on to the last question about Turnus's death? Okay.
All
So
right.
we need to-
I want to go back to what Zach said about why Pallas is added in the text. And I think it's because he kind of like adds complexity to the character of Aeneas in the sense of like, okay, well, on one hand, he's this very pious character. He abides by the rules of law or the laws of war, and then on the other hand, he's just completely driven by emotion. I mean, whenever he gets enraged, he just turns into an absolute savage. So, I mean, like, looking at the question, it's asking, why does he pause? And I think he pauses because basically the question refers to both aspects of his character, this pious aspect and then this aspect of just like kind of immature, just like raw emotion. And that's what he's driven off of. So the first part is on book 12, line 1090. Let me get there. It's like at the very end. Yeah. And basically Turnus is giving him this like begging, just plea for his life. And he's saying, here, the victor and vanquished, I stretch my hands to you. So the men of Latium have seen me in defeat. Lavinia is your bride. Go no further down the road of hatred. So he's essentially, finally, at this point, abiding by the rules of war. He's giving him respect. He's showing him honor. And so I feel like Aeneas respects that a little bit. And so that's why he pauses like, okay, yeah, like I understand. But then he sees the belt, and that his character just completely turns 180, and he just becomes enraged at the fact that, I mean, this guy just completely disrespected somebody that he was supposed to protect. So, I mean, I think that the question just kind of corresponds to the dualistic character of Aeneas in the sense that he has complete polar opposites of emotion, and he's not a very simple character. Like, he can act in either one of those polar kind of modes.
Right, and we've seen him be emotional about his friends and lovers before. Like with Creusa, he was emotional. With Dido, he cried a lot. So it's not surprising that when something that hit close to home, really changed him and his course of action.
Also, like to go off that, in like the book 11, there were so many like father and son deaths, and there was one specific instance where he gave the funeral to the kid that like jumped out to save his father, and so he like took them both back to their homeland. I don't
He
know.
doesn't defile his body.
Yeah, he doesn't defile his body, and there were so many like son and father deaths, so it really shows like the loyalty he had to all of the different.
Right, and that just goes back to what Rourke said about him being a different type of protagonist than the other ones we've seen. He's like moral and upright and had, values.
I think that's where the similarities between Aeneas and Achilles stop.
But also, like, the fact that he has all of these sides to him makes him a more, like, 3D and realistic character and, like, more interesting than if he was just, like, this pious guy who, like, always prayed to the gods and always did what they said. Like, when he has these moments where he's driven by emotion, like, it's more relatable and you can understand, like, what he's going through, which is kind of similar to Achilles. Like, he's this great, awesome, like, god warrior thing, and like he's really powerful, but like when he has moments of emotion and like connection, that's when you relate to him more.
I'd like to go back to around the 1090 area, 386. I was kind of wondering how you guys interpreted it, because it was mentioned that Turnus was kind of paying his respects to Aeneas, and that Aeneas started to respect it because Turnus apparently had like some change of character. But I saw that more as like Turnus recognizes he's about to die, so this is kind of like his last ditch effort, and be like, well, maybe if I kind of like flatter Aeneas, he'll save me. And then on line it's like right above 1100. It says himself back to as Turnus's work began to sway him more and more. And when they saw the belt, I didn't really see that as Aeneas seeing the belt and getting like pissed off and killing him. I saw it more as like him seeing the belt, recognizing why he wanted to kill Turnus in the first place, and recognizing how much turmoil and how like kind of horrible character Turnus was in the first place, and kind of did more what was deserved, as opposed to him just impulsively killing him based off of seeing something that made him mad. So I guess I was kind of wondering how you guys interpreted that.
I think it's just, I really get that from right when it says, so the last bit of the book.
Mm-hmm.
It says, when all, at once he caught sight of the fateful sword belt of Pallas, swept over Turnus' shoulder, gleaming, blah, blah. He knew by heart. That would back up what you're saying about he knew all along. But then later he goes, he says, Aeneas, soon as his eyes drank in that plunder keepsake of his own savage grief, flaring up in fury, terrible in his rage, that kind of stuff.
I think it's all anger.
Like, can it be both? Can't it be both?
I think it can be both.
No right
I would
answer.
definitely say
Yeah.
both.
It's almost more like the emotions of the heart, or like it's
Yeah.
the truth. Almost.
Right. It's kind of like first in his head he knew, and then in his heart he was like,
Right.
Oh my
I
gosh.
can see him being emotional because he knew.
yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and also, I think it's also important to emphasize off that is how, like, Turnus this whole time, since we're introduced to him, seems to be the exact opposite of Aeneas when it comes to not only really his desire for war and to battle against Aeneas, but particularly his lack of devotion to the gods. I mean, he says in the very end, I think it's like somewhere where he says, page 384, book 12, line 1040. He says, it's Turnus shakes his head, I don't fear you, who places first, my fierce friend. It's the gods that frighten me, Jove, my mortal foe. Well, we never hear anything like this from Aeneas, talking about like the gods as his sworn enemy and stuff. And we see this whole time with Turnus fighting against the fate of him dying, and Aeneas like building Rome up at its origin. So, in the sense where Aeneas is all about following through fate and going by the guidance of the gods, Turnus seems to be his whole opposite. And almost his alter ego in the sense like this guy is fighting as hard as he can against the fates until really we see in the end where he talks about if it's my fate to die, let me die. It says something like that. I think it's like it's late in book 12. Yeah, because I know your will. So I don't know. I can't find it.
I honestly, I don't really think that's true. I think that fate is kind of just against him because Juno just kept like prolonging his life, and he didn't necessarily want that, especially when like she like took him off in the ship. He's like, they're all gonna think I'm a coward. And then when his sister came down, and she said on page 376, book 12, lines like around 760, Turnus, you are our last hope. Pity your own fate. Aeneas strikes like lightning. And then on page 377, book 12, line 85-ish. Now, my sister, the fates are in command. Don't hold me back. Where God and relentless fortune call on us, that's the way we go. I'm set on fighting Aeneas, however bitter it is, to meet my death. You'll never see me disgraced again. So I really feel like that it was the fates and the gods that were against him, and he wanted to fight Aeneas, but Juno just kept prolonging his life.
Yeah, going off of that, the gods like really impact Turnus. Like I would say he's one of the most impacted characters by the gods, because you have to remember that like the whole reason this entire war started is because Juno wanted to cause trouble, and so she made like Alecto come down and like make Turnus mad about losing Lavinia. And so like the whole reason this starts is because of the gods. And then after Camilla dies, everyone's like, well, Turnus is really awful. Like he's the whole reason this started. And, like I felt bad for him because it's really not his fault. It was like the gods who made him do it. So although he seems kind of like crazy and rash, like this was his fate, and like it's not really him who like wanted this to happen.
Yeah, and on page 384, 1040, he tells Joey his mortal coil. So that shows that the gods are in the end like basically all against him. Or the fates are.
Yeah, like he has a right to have the gods frighten him because they pretty much messed up his entire life.
Do you think he recognizes that they messed up his entire life? Like,
I mean,
not that it's relevant, not necessarily for the point. I'm just curious. Like, do you think he recognizes? Like, is there a way that he recognizes?
he probably doesn't know that he's driven by the gods, but like at the same time, I think that the line when Virgil is writing it has that meaning behind it, even if the character doesn't actually know. Like you know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
I just have so much trouble comprehending that, like the absence of free will. I didn't live at that time, obviously, but
Thank you, Ben.
just in case anyone was wondering.
Really?
No, I mean, like, I really do mean that. Like, it's important to try. Like, I really tried to get into like Virgil's head. I just can't.
One important thing to note is it's hard to see them as not having free will because they treat it like they don't. Like they have free will. Like if someone does something, like for instance, Turnus was instigated, he was influenced by the gods to start this entire war. But people treat it like it's him, not the gods. So
Yeah, I worded it poorly.
yeah. It's like, oh, she's madly in love. It's like, well,
Right, they never say, oh, I don't really feel this way. It's the gods. No one's ever like, oh, don't blame him. It's the gods. You know, it's all like,
Right, exactly.
yeah.
That was
So
just
it's
the
all
status
like,
quo.
yeah, exactly. It's like that's what's really happening.
Yeah.
it's like,
And it's like if you believe, in this monotheistic Christian God, like a lot of people here do, it's like people, like someone kills someone. For all they know, it could be God. That's a
Or,
stretch.
like, the
Yeah,
phrase, like, it was
but you know what I
background.
mean?
That's what I was just
Yeah.
thinking. Like, what if all of this is actually true, and like there are gods who are above us right now, like controlling
Pulling
us?
strings.
Yeah,
this class right now.
yeah. You never
We would
know.
never
Stated.
know.
Yeah.
Camino Real was meant to be here.
That is fake real.
Coach K?
These gods.
Yeah, I thought it was curious to like the way the gods get involved in the story because we see the parts where, like in Marianne, Joe is, I think it's been 11, Actually, I can't find that either, but Kelvis literally said, like, stop it from getting any interference from you guys participating in this war. Like, let their
That's the very
sword
beginning
side of it, don't let them
of 10.
lunch right out. What's up?
Can't prove it, don't believe you.
It's the very beginning of 10. He calls the
Beginning of 10. Oh, he
yeah.
calls the council, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, but we see them intervening afterwards, anyways. And like with Venus, where he lets Juno get involved, and with Turnus again after they both see Venus intervening. And it also goes with the fact of like how much do they actually believe and know that the gods acting like. We see circumstances in which they're fighting, and they'll say the description like driven by the rage of Juno or stuff like that, and it's like, is that more? How would do we know that it's being used as more metaphorically than literally in the context of the Indian itself?
I just had a thought going off of what Isabel said about like how would we know if like we weren't being controlled. In perspective, they did have a lot of knowledge about existing gods, and they did have like pretty frequent encounters with gods. So I have hope that anywhere we would
Are you using the
have
word
more
existing
knowledge.
literally?
No, you know,
Like in the
Oh, in the text?
their-
Okay,
in their
okay,
world.
okay.
In the text,
Okay.
they did exist, and they had frequent encounters. Yeah, not Virgil.
Right.
They seem pretty aware of the fact that the gods were like pretty invested in their lives.
I mean, Aeneas was the son of one. So
And
Right,
like
which also blows my mind.
Really fun.
evidence of the fact that they're like they know that the gods are like there and intervening in their lives, so that they pray to them before they do anything, because they know that like if they can, the gods are gonna like interfere, and they want the gods to interfere on their side.
yeah.
Maybe something interesting to think of too is like of the gods maybe as like representative of the forces in our lives that control us, like war and like maybe please
Sorry.
and like I don't know, think of the Furies as like pure evil, you know, and we have those things in our lives, you know, war and then, you know, love and all of that. And I think that's really important to point out too. And I think it's interesting, like the council on maybe like a more basic level, we can think about that is every time we make a decision or something huge is going on in our lives, like we have to reconcile all of these different parts of ourselves.
It's like Inside Out.
Yeah, you
That's a
know,
good movie.
maybe. And also another thing about the council is I think it's a really good example of the Romans improving upon the Greek model again, and like, yeah, just like meeting and like talking it out. Obviously, it's not like a good thing what ends up happening, but they call it a council, which we didn't really see in the Iliad. Anyways.
I have a question for the class. Do you think that like which two are most like each other? Achilles, Gilgamesh, Aeneas?
I think Achilles and Gilgamesh are definitely more so.
See, I
think-
would vote Achilles and Aeneas.
I think that Achilles and
Aeneas is way
Aeneas
too
live in
multifaceted.
more similar worlds, but that like character trait wise, Gilgamesh and Achilles are like more angry and mad all the time.
I think
They're both arrogant.
Yeah, I feel like Gilgamesh and Achilles, because they're from different worlds, are motivated by different things, but like you said, like character traits seems more similar. Whereas Aeneas and Achilles are motivated by similar things, but seem to be
handle the situation differently.
I wish that like Graves' question had talked about the relationship between Ajax and Achilles, because I think that their relationship is more similar to the relationship between Enkidu and Gilgamesh than it is between Patroclus and Achilles.
Or even like Ajax and Achilles are both being more similar to Aeneas and the fallacies.
No,
It seems like more stupid. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, like more. I don't think that Aeneas had.
Ended the lineage,
Yeah.
like
Honestly, yeah.
Probably.
Because we know that Rome is next, and that's it. It's like the person. It's like-
would you guys
I might
ended
have-
it with like the marriage?
Oh, like if we were writing it.
I might have ended it with like Rome.
I might have ended it with like
But then you'd have to go all the way to like
I would have ended it
or something.
exactly like this.
Or maybe like them like getting to the shore of like where Rome will be, and it's like a hopeful horizon only.
And then horses gallop past.
Yeah.
We are a
It's
little
a
bit biased
flag.
going to the ending because we kind of know what's going to happen.
Actually, I would have like
Maybe
waking
keep
up in the dreams.
You know how it calls from the
Yeah.
gods, Inception? I want like at the
Oscar.
end,
Yeah.
like have like and bring that back in where it's a reminder that it's just like
Yeah.
Virgil's story.
Yeah.
Throw in some uses.
Prince and music.
Wait, we still have time.
2 minutes
Just Ben, do you want to?
No, I'm gonna wait.
until he's here.
I'm gonna wait.
Does anybody have any additional comments?
Excellent.
At least it's
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
I think it was.
All right.
Yeah, let's leave.
Don't worry, I'm well.
Hey, we should play for him.
He's waiting outside. Like I saw when I was walking back.
Yeah, tell him to come in
Oh, it's
here.
outside.
Henry!
Time.
We should have stopped at 1:45.